be starting the live stream. Okay, we are going. Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is the second installment of our last meeting. By noon today, the TCWG will have met 6 times over the course of 12 days. What we hope to do today is finish up any of the final comments and thoughts that folks have on the report, spend a little time looking back and reflecting on the process, and then spending a little time looking forward, thinking about how the momentum and the arc of this work is able to be leveraged so that many of the prospective thoughts you have in the report come to fruition. If you could flip to the next slide. For the folks that are watching on the live stream, we are going to be having public comment today at 10:40 a.m. We will share on the PowerPoint slide the information for how to get into the Zoom meeting. The Zoom meeting is for TCWG members up until that point. If anybody's having any technical difficulties on the live stream, feel free to shoot Michaela an email at the email address that's up there on the screen. Okay, next slide, please. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to turn it over to you, Kathleen, for any welcoming opening remarks. I'm going to review the agenda, and then we're just going to jump right into the work.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for the work yesterday, the spirit of open, honest discussion and collaboration. And I hope our last day of meetings continues in that same spirit, which I'm sure it will, because of all you have all contributed throughout this process. And we will talk about how much I'll miss you all, but I'm sure we'll have work together going forward. But let's get the last few things worked on, move forward, and conclude this process. I really appreciate all the work you are all doing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Why don't we flip to the next slide? So what we're going to do is we are going to spend the bulk of the first part of the day, first part of the morning, talking about changes to the report. What was received in your email was the slide deck that we're going to be going through live on the call, and I'll get to that content in here in just a little bit. Then, as I mentioned, we're going to do a round robin, and my expectation and my desire during that round robin is to hear from as many voices as we can on the phone. We'll take a break, have public comment again at 10:40, and then following that, spend a little time talking together on how you all might work together going forward. That is what the plan is for the day. Why don't you flip to the next slide? What we're going to do first, though, before we get to what the specific changes are to the report, what I wanted to do is I wanted to share with folks what you can anticipate happening in the next 4 weeks with the report. See if folks have any questions, see if folks have any reflections on that, and describe what the process is. We thought that that would be important to do so that you were able to take that into consideration as we had the conversations going forward. So I'm going to share my screen. I've got a couple of bullet points that I want to run through, maybe run over, depending on how it goes with you all. So based on the call today, Ross is going to produce a final report by June 23rd, Thursday. When you receive that final report, the only section not considered complete is going to be an appendix in the report entitled TCWG Member Comments on the Final Report. So when you receive that report on the 23rd, you're going to have until July 7th to review the report. So we're giving folks a couple of weeks to do that. By July 7th, what we're going to be asking for is for one response from each seat on the TCWG, and by seat we mean, we had a primary and an alternate. We're going to be asking that the primary and alternate coordinate together and provide one response. And the response we're going to be asking folks to fill out, or we're going to send out a form, and the response is going to be that as you look at that report that we distributed, you select A, that I agree that the report reflects the deliberations of this group. You can select option B, which is I agree that the report reflects the deliberations of the group, but you want to provide perspectives that will accompany the report. Or C, you do not agree that the report reflects the deliberations of the group, and then you can provide perspectives to accompany the report. What we're trying to do is we're trying to be very respectful of your time and be respectful of your personal agency over the content of the report. What we're then going to do is we're going to take all of the responses as we receive them from you and produce a table in the appendix of the report. And we're not going to edit any of your responses. And what I want to show you is what an example of that appendix could look like. This is an example based on another advisory group that we ran a year ago for another state agency. And so up on the screen is exactly what an example of what the appendix would look like. So we'll say that a final draft of the report was distributed in June 22nd, and then we'll have the statistics on all members agreed, 21 of the 23 agreed that it reflects the group's deliberations, whatever that number is, we're going to have here. And then any of the comments that you provide, we're going to put unedited into the table. The idea being is that when the legislature receives the report, they have the report, and then they have all of the additional context that you think is important that that the report reader knows. And so this is an example of some of the comments that we received for the other report that we wrote. Someone said that recommendation 3 needs further clarification, or someone wanted to emphasize that a summary in one of the tables was really important. Someone wanted to indicate that they felt as if we needed to carry an additional reference in there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull all your comments into a table, append it to the report, and deliver it to Kathleen and FSEC by July 14th. And then per the charge, FSEC then has a responsibility to transmit the report to the legislature by November of this year. And what we've talked to Kathleen about is that she is not going to change any of the report. She's going to transmit the report unedited and then put a cover memo on top of it. So that is what we're proposing and what we think the next couple of weeks are going to look like. Kathleen, I want to see if you have any comments to add, and then I want to see if folks have any questions, if that makes sense. And if I want to see if invite folks to voice any feelings or positive or negative about this process. Kathleen?
No, that is excellent summary of how we're going to move the report forward. Thank you.
So any questions? What do folks think? I see the thumbs up, Will. Thank you. Thank you, Brendan. I see the thumbs up. Glenn, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ben. All right, so that's what's going to happen.
Rob,
Yep.
Did you see Don's request that you put the dates in the chat?
Oh, yep. Thank you. Michaela, can you please do that for me?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, so Susan, could you please bring up the PowerPoint slide? Okay, so the next, however long we need, we're going to work through the materials we sent yesterday. This is a tacit acknowledgement that this kind of work can be somewhat tedious on calls, but we're at the end of the process, and so this is the kind of work that the process calls for. What you have in the PowerPoint deck is a slide that's got words that are going to show up in the final report that we want your eyes on. The way we generated this list was based on the conversations we had yesterday and the areas you all wanted to talk about. we took that feedback and we're making specific suggestions to proposed language. What is in yellow is what's new language, and what is not in yellow is the original language. In those instances where we were striking out and we thought it was important to show the strikeout, we provided that. Most of the slides have, I chose not to do track changes. So we've got proposed language and original language, so folks are able to do an easier side-by-side comparison. The kind of feedback that we're looking for is that, do these changes reflect the changes you directed us to make yesterday? And then do you have any other subsequent direction for us for how we want to modify that language? Susan is going to be trying to capture that in real time, but we're going to try to keep it as least messy as possible on the screen.
Rob, if I could, on this, oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. On this
Nope.
first one, I
Yep.
wanted to just clarify that there were 3 items in this particular one that people might remember, one that included the I-90 corridor, but it's not showing here because nobody proposed changes. So I just wanted to make sure in this particular instance, because it had some more context there.
Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate that. So this is perfect. So why don't we move into this one? So the changes we made here was a clarification that Anders suggested we make, that the north-south corridor is important for both the solar from California Southwest plus hydro resources for Canada, and it's also important for that transmission of the wind and solar from Eastern Washington. The second bullet, Katie suggested that we should remove potentially, given that offshore wind development is projected in CETA. So that's what the changes reflect, and we think that's what we heard yesterday. Anyone have any different recollection or anything else they want to suggest for these 2 bullets, or even the previous bullet that that Kathleen said? Yeah, Glenn.
I generally think this is good improvement. CETA doesn't directly call for development of offshore wind, and so it might be better to just identify projected offshore wind development without referring it to
CETA,
linking it to CETA specifically.
Dawn?
Excuse me. Offshore wind is going to come through the usual custom of some tribes, but possibly the Quinault Reservation. So if you say Grays Harbor to I-5, it's actually offshore to I-5. So I didn't think about that yesterday, but it did come up in another meeting I was in. So I'm not sure how that can be worded, but I think
I was thinking this exact same thing, Dawn, that it's not necessarily going to come through Grays Harbor specifically. It may be Southwest Washington.
Yeah. Yeah, there are other routes that it could take. So
yeah,
coastal Washington as well.
South,
Southwest is most likely.
Washington's southern coast is what I would suggest.
well,
Perfect.
may not even be southern coast, according to some of the tribes over there. I don't know for sure. I haven't been part of those discussions, but I have heard from Quinault and Makah about their concerns. Anyway, offshore sounds good, but in reference to CETA, I think it makes it clearer to have CETA in there, because if I were a legislator that wasn't really part of all these discussions, I wouldn't know about the requirement under CETA that offshore has to be developed, or have to be looked at by a certain day or a certain year. So that would take me to CETA to go, oh, where's that offshore stuff coming from? So I don't know. Maybe you want to.
This is Katie. There is nothing in CETA that requires that we look at offshore by a certain date. The state energy strategy that was developed and released last year does indicate that offshore according to the models, should come online around 2040. So if you want to put a document in there, I recommend saying the Washington State Energy Strategy.
Okay, is that the Commerce document?
Yes.
Okay, that was developed. Yeah, that was some while ago. Well, anyway, I think it just referencing some sort of a, document that they can look at would be helpful.
Perfect. Okay. So,
Thanks.
we're going to have some version of offshore, and we'll be sure to change it. I don't from 1-5 to I-5, Interstate 5 there, but the final report is going to look very, very similar to that, and we can make sure that we carry this forward. The exact language, we might play a little bit with the offshore to make it more precise, but it's going to be this. Anything else on this one before we move on?
See a hand up from Katie.
Oh, Katie. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, old hand.
Oh, legacy hand. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what we're going to talk about next, I believe, is one of the overarching principles. So this one, we didn't add many words, but we changed some of the ordering of it. So what we did here, trying to be reflective of the comments, we added authorization to receive funding for the recognition that there may be some fee collection, cost recovery programs that could be authorized. And then we changed it to read that tribes and federal, state, and local agencies providing essential project review. And then we put e.g. FSEC and Department of Historic Preservation. And then per Allison's suggestion, we added the WHO, but we didn't add that up into the bolded language. We added that down within the body of the description there. So what do folks think on the changes here? Any thoughts?
This is Stuart. I just put some language in the chat, just tweaking it. I think it'd be better if it said, we call on the Washington State Legislature and U.S. Congress to ensure adequate funding. They might not actually be funding it. They might make sure somebody else funds it or whatever. But it also it's also more of like a actionable thing as opposed to crossing our fingers,
Well, I just wonder how much we've put that in the other recommendations. I don't think that's as consistent. We could definitely highlight that in a cover letter. I don't know how others feel about that, but we're not really doing much of the same call to action in our other points.
Yes, Don.
I think I think this was someone's maybe Ben's suggestion about the authorization to receive funding.
Yeah.
Which came up from some of the agencies. So down below where you have yellow, I think you kind of need to repeat that it has to not only be funded but authorized. So properly funded and or authorized.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Any reflections on Kathleen's comment on the structure of the and the strength of the language there? Okay, so I think the language is going to look like what is up there on the screen then, and we'll note Stu's suggestion, but not carry the stuff that has the call to action language.
No, I withdraw my suggestion.
Okay, suggestion withdrawn. Okay, any final comments on this one? Okay, sweet. Let's move to slide 59, another overarching principle. Okay, so this one was a suggestion. There were in section E, there were a couple of principles, principle E4 and principle E5, that talks about interconnected transmission system, interconnectedness of the transmission system. Glenn suggested on the call yesterday that at the heart of those two principles was the big picture assertion that robust transmission network that's interconnected and all of the things that were in those principles is a key overarching principle. Glenn provided language for us to take a look at here that would go in the overarching principle section and would replace E4 and E5. Glenn, do you want to quickly talk about this language? And then, so this is totally brand new language. I'm going to ask Glenn to talk about the language, and I'm going to ask folks to reflect on it. Glenn?
Yeah, thanks. And I, this is my initial effort at trying to capture this as a kind of an overarching principle, something that I think explains our motivation in trying to solve some of the issues related to expanding the transmission system. This is why we would want to do that. And I did feel like we could eliminate those other items in section E if we were able to come up with an overarching principle like this. So it's just a suggestion.
I'm wondering, looking at the last sentence, it should be is key. Maybe that's the overarching principle. I was looking at first to try and maybe flip, acknowledge the central role, and instead actually have us acknowledge that, right? So maybe it's the last sentence that should be the principle.
Glenn, any thoughts on that?
That probably worked too.
Just give it a try here. I can change it back.
Thank you, Susan.
I don't know if we need that acknowledge, or we could say a robust interregional bulk power transmission network. Take out the acknowledge the central role in that second sentence, right?
Yeah, is and then you'd have to add is necessary to achieve or for achieving or something. Yeah. In.
Gotcha. Oh, dang. Sorry. When I don't usually
real-time
work in this
editing
mode.
is fun.
Yeah.
My cursor keeps moving. There we go.
Glenn, how does that fit?
It's getting better and better.
What do other folks think of this addition and the language that's up there?
There's a little bit in the chat, Rob. You might want to take a peek at
Thank you.
from Rob and Stu.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Susan. Okay, I'm going to last call here for this language.
So yes, are we going to incorporate the idea, which is don't forget Canada, right?
What I was saying was that it's already they're part of the Western Interconnect and WEC. So I think that like people who are dealing with this stuff will probably.
I think it's good to call it out, as well as other states and and Canada.
What about
Or
referring
just
to
the West,
West?
including Canada, including Canadian provinces?
Because we have to remember that we also need to educate people, and not everybody, we're not, our only audience isn't just people who know.
Kathleen, thank you, Stu. Glenn, I heard you had potential thought.
Oh, it was a variation on this, so I think that's good.
Perfect.
See, Don's hand is up.
Yeah, Don, jump in.
I'm sorry, but I don't remember the lower costs element of this. Can somebody remind me if we talked about this will all, go to lower costs of a greater reliability I get, but somebody's going to have to pay for it. So I don't know where the lower costs come from.
Yeah, Glenn. Thank you, Don.
Yeah, that's a really good question and an important point. In the energy strategy work that we did, we found that if we're able to use resources from across the West, we can select better performing resources. The wind in the Rocky Mountains, the solar in the Southwest or Utah, places like that. We're able to lower our costs if we're able to build resources, acquire resources across the West, and that also improves the reliability of the system, because the wind blows in different places at different times, but it's always blowing somewhere. And the same sort of thing with solar resources too.
Don and
If
Glenn,
I-
I have an idea. Oh, yeah, Kathleen.
If I can add a little bit to that too, from my recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, but I think that the idea is that because you have diverse resources, first of all, then you can make the most in different times of the day when the power is needed. But the second thing is, if we're relying only on resources within Washington to meet our goals for clean electricity, given the increase in usage, then we would have to build much, much more within the state, both in terms of generation and transmission. Is that pretty close, Glenn?
Yeah, we would need more resources overall in terms of nameplate capacity in megawatts, if they're all coming from the same geographic area, like just within Washington, because they have less diversity, and so you have to worry about the contingencies that they all slow down at the same moment. So it's not only is the wind in the Rockies cheaper than wind, say along the, in Western Washington, but we would actually need more of that Western Washington wind because of the diversity, the loss of diversity.
Okay, then I think it's not only enhanced transmission capacity, but it's enhanced transmission capacity and diversity across the West would, may lead to lower costs. I think we have to put some sort of what lower costs are we talking about? Because the consumer is going to, initially be paying more. I mean, the money to do all this has got to come from somewhere. So lower cost to whom? And
So one thing I was thinking, maybe it makes sense to footnote, put a footnote after lower costs or lower costs and greater reliability, and refer folks to the Washington Energy Strategy where that modeling work occurred. so that there is clarity about what the source was for that statement. What do folks think about that?
A footnote is fine with me. I'm not aware of any contrary studies that say, that suggest that make it the idea that we should say may lead to as opposed to will lead to. I believe there are. It's a robust conclusion that a diverse
Glenn, I think, are others having a hard time hearing Glenn?
portfolio of resources will yield lower costs.
Glenn, I'm sorry, Glenn, do you mind saying the last, that last statement again? You froze for me for just a minute.
Yeah, sorry about that. But I'm not aware of any studies to the contrary that a diverse portfolio drawn from across the West, even with the transmission costs, the additional transmission required to do that, that's what will lead to the lowest costs, whether it's cost to the utilities or cost to consumers. It's basically the same thing.
Dawn, can I ask you a question? Is your view of the lower cost implying that it would be lower costs than the costs are today, or that it might be confusing for that reason to people when they see that this may actually, the effort overall might be more expensive than it is today? Is that one of the
Well, I just think I think there needs to be a qualifier to costs, because when we incorporate overburdened communities in here and consumers in here, who's going to benefit from any of these lower costs? So, we not only have economic, but we're also supposed to be looking at, impacts to these communities and to the consumer. So I just think throwing it out there without some kind of a qualifier about, who's going to benefit with these lower costs. I mean, it's going to be very expensive to enhance and diversify transmission. So I think there needs to be some sort of a path to say, ultimately who's going to benefit, what lower costs are we talking about? And unless you've got all this other reference that Glenn's speaking of, I would question that if I were a legislator. I'm questioning it now.
Stu?
So. Yeah, I think it's, I think Arnie was talking about this, but it was embedded in what he had to say. But it's like there were huge transmission costs associated with the Columbia dams, but it got spread, but it still got lower electricity because it was spread out over so much time and so many people. And he sort of referenced that yes, this transmission can cost a great deal, but if it's spread out and paid for by users over many years, because it's you and this stuff's going to be working for 30-40 years, and the cost can be spread out over that time. The project, again, I'm sort of with Glenn saying we can come up with some more of the documentation, but the projections are that with renewable energy is so much cheaper, and even with the transmission, we're still looking at lower costs for ratepayers in the future.
Well, maybe you could say clean energy, renewable energy. I think the cost element is just a whole different even subject, really. So if you want to have a different bullet point about costs, explaining somewhat what you just said, what Stu just explained, makes more sense to me, because overburdened communities, the cost on overburdened communities is enormous. And I'm including the tribe on that. So it's, the cost to them to do any of this is large. It's not lower.
I hear what you're saying, Dawn, and I think it's the one statement in terms of the cost to meet the goals. If we have the goals, right, which we have, we're considering that a given, then the cost to achieve those goals, and maybe that's what we need to put in, is the cost to achieve the goals, is less, and that's proven through the work that's this has been done in terms of the studies. If there's the diversified energy supply from diverse resources, then if we were to try to build it all within the state. So it's if then maybe is missing, right? The cost to build this using those diverse resources from coming in from other states is less than it would be to do within our own state.
Yeah, I just think it needs to be another bullet point, because you're adding another variable there about, you know, it being regional and including other states.
Well, I do
And
think
it is
that's
starting out with an interregional transmission capacity. So I get that. I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with this unless it's explained in a different slide, different paragraph, something.
yeah, because I think that is the point of this principle, is that it costs less to achieve the goals using the regional resources, even with the transmission, than it would be to achieve the goals Washington on its own. Because there's less built generation, there's less built transmission.
Yeah,
So-
I don't know who's typing there, but that qualifier sounds like it might make sense. Is that you,
Yeah,
Rob?
No, that's Susan. And so what Susan is typing and what I'm hearing is that what we really want to say here is that the qualifier for lowering the costs is that it is these are not the words that are going to show up in the slide, but these are different words than what shows up in the slide, to make sure that I'm understanding the point, Don, is that it is going to be more affordable to meet the goals. The clean energy goal is going to be more affordable to meet the clean energy goals if we do it as a interregional transmission, by thinking about it from the perspective of interregional transmission capacity.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is what's going to happen. This
Thank
is
you.
one, Don and Glenn and others. This is a wonderful example of the brilliance and the imperfection of the process going forward. So Susan and I are going to have the responsibility of trying to craft final language. And so when the language comes out on July 7th, it's going to be us putting that language in. And, you know, Don, when you respond using the that process that we described before, if we didn't get it quite right, or you still don't like the way it turned out, that would be the place where, you know, you could provide an additional comment. And you could say something like, in overarching principle number 2, the lower cost aspect, you know, it feels really important that the lower cost aspect be limited, the understanding be limited to the meeting the clean energy goals, and that that we're not explicitly talking about lowering costs to overburdened communities or something like that, Don. So that would be the opportunity for you or for anybody if we don't quite capture the language in a way that is satisfactory. Okay, great. All right, let's flip slides.
Whoop, not that much. There we go.
Okay, so this one here, and Michaela, there is somebody in the waiting room. Will you Google that number really quick before you let them in? See if you can figure out who it is. And then if it feels like it's someone from our group, let them in. If not, maybe you can try calling that number to find out who they are. Okay, thank you, Michaela. Okay, so this slide looks a little bit different than the one I sent you yesterday because it was some awesome conversation that we had via email. So what you're seeing on the slide is the original text on the left.
Hey, lady, how are you doing?
And this is about Principle E6. We have the language that we had proposed in the original email in yellow, and then Lorna had suggested the changes that are in green, and Clint had replied that he's comfortable with the changes that Lorna suggested there in green. So what I'm asking folks to reflect on is the yellow and the green. So as written here in the proposed section is the language that we think we're carrying forward. If you'll recall, the conversation that we had yesterday was really about how we wanted to frame the site generation near load. And Clint was really clear yesterday that he thought and it felt it was very important from his perspective that we acknowledge that siting generation near load is important to communities because of the potential impact to communities of having transmission. And so Clint, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to recall the conversation. I think the language we have up on the screen is a compromise that works for folks, but that's what I'm hoping to hear.
I have one comment, Rob, and I think the word exploit is a negative word. So
pursue.
Yeah, and
Yes.
Kathleen, I actually had agreed. I think that just got lost in the translation. So sorry, Rob.
No problem, Lorna.
I thought I changed it to explore.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry, I missed that.
No, it's okay. No worries. You got a big job herding cats.
These are like cute kittens.
What do you think about pursue? I do think maybe pursue's more active.
Yeah, I like.
Could I just
pursue.
ask what, can I just ask how this takes us forward? Just seeing as developers already do consider where transmission capacity is, where there's interconnection capability. I mean, developers aren't looking at sites where there isn't transmission to allow interconnection to happen. So I just wonder how this takes us forward and how it's different from how things are already done and planned for.
Anyone have a reflection on that?
I mean, I think that's fair. I don't disagree with you, Katie. I just thought people wanted something on here, so I was trying to keep it consistent to show. Yeah, but I agree with you. It's not a new thing. Because the fact of the matter is, it costs a bunch of money to build transmission, and it costs per distance, right? So you're always going to want to minimize transmission.
Yeah, and one other thing, just to capture a little bit more nuance around siting near load, I don't know that it's an exact one-to-one when you think about where communities have historically been overburdened by projects that have been sited near load, fuel-based projects, and creating a strategy that says we value projects that are sited near load isn't so far off from the way things have historically been done. And I would wonder what the EJ implications would be for that. And so that's why I haven't really loved this principle all along. Considering what I said earlier about how things are already cited, along with the implications of creating a strategy where we do value projects cited near load, and also considering the way renewables operate and how they are reliant on where resources are strong, I would wonder how much this principle takes us forward, but maybe we can think about that more, but that is my feedback.
No, and Katie, again, you raised great points, and I don't disagree with you. I think I'm not sure if Clint was heading towards residential, like residential versus industrial, right? But you're absolutely right. And that was yesterday I made that point that, you know, our fossil system, you can cite it near load. So it's hard to cite renewables near load, but
I got Ben, then Clint. Ben?
Yeah, thanks. I think this would be a good place. Like in the original language, there's some wording there that addresses some of the habitat issues, and I'm wondering if we can put in like toward the bottom of the proposed language, where to go. And so the environmental and cultural impacts of operating power plants located near population centers or sensitive habitat or something along those lines.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, Clint, please jump in.
And then one other,
sorry.
Yeah, just one other quick thing on that. We might want to add the word health to where it has, and the environmental and cultural impacts, because the impacts of operating those power plants near population centers are more what's environmental health. But so I would just say like the health, environmental, and cultural impacts are, yeah, maybe there's a better way to word it, but that's where I would start.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, Clint, jump in. Clint, I'm not hearing you.
I keep hearing renewable, and I don't think that's necessarily the thing that we were tasked to focus on. It was about clean carbon and reducing our carbon footprint. So it's for utilities. So I just don't think that we should be strongly focused on building transmission lines just to cite renewables over in Eastern Washington or elsewhere, just to get power to those load centers. There's nothing that keeps this from having a generation in those areas closer to where there's load centers, and to reduce the need for transmission lines or impacts to communities, to tribes, to cultural areas. And
yeah, Clint.
so, no, I'm not done yet. And
Sorry.
And that, you know, if solar and renewable is good in Eastern Washington at 20% effective capacity, move it to Oregon where it's 30%, or move it to California where it's 40%, or move it to the south of the equator. You know, there's nothing that says that this has to be built in communities that don't necessarily need it. So this is getting really wordy in here, and I'm sorry that it's gotten to that point. But if you guys want to delete it, that's fine. But I think we're missing the point and trying to focus entirely on renewables. I'll leave it at a period on that.
Clint, thank you, and thanks for your comments. I think one of what we're trying to do here is really talk about transmission. So I think even Glenn said it yesterday that trying to talk about citing new generation in a way gets us away from that, because that's why we're talking about the interregional, right? We're talking about what is the best, most cost-effective way of achieving our goals. And it's probably a combination of all the above, right? And certainly in terms of the technologies that are in front of us. So we're really not getting, or shouldn't be getting, too far down the road into talking about citing generation. So how can we make this more fit within our actual purview here, I guess is my question.
Yeah, Katie.
So thank you, Chair Drew. I think that orients us and it takes care of a lot of what I was going to say. So actually, with that said, I don't really think that this principle fits that, you know, I think it sets a strategy for how to cite resources to meet our goals. And I think there's some disagreement on what resources to use to do that. But if you do look at the IRPs that are out at the utilities, it does show, you know, a diverse mix of renewable and clean resources to that are viable right now. You know, I won't go on and on, but again, I think what you said resonated with me, and maybe that does mean we get rid of this, or really have to look at how to reword this to make sure it doesn't set a strategy for how to cite the renewable need.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Stu?
Yeah, I mean, as I recall how this came up, I think this, you know, again, our audience is people who don't know as much as we do about this stuff, and there's sort of an obvious thing. Well, why don't you just do it where it belongs, you know? And I think the original intention here was, oh, yeah, we should. You're right. We should do that. And if that doesn't work, we're going to have to do this other stuff. So I think there's a usefulness for having this, and I've heard Clint ready to have other suggestions. So I guess I'm saying I think it might be could get reworded. You know, we could work on it a little more and reword it and capture that original idea of it of why this was here. That it's not saying do this. It's saying, you know, of course you should do this where it makes sense.
Clint, yeah, jump in.
A couple of comments. Well, we already do this on that. Well, we already look at optimizing transmission. We already look at increasing capacity on transmission. So why are we even talking about that in this document? And I think but I think it is important to point out that some of these may seem obvious, but that and maybe it's not a strategy, but maybe it's something that you know, given that all these other aspects of trying to optimize and efficiently use our transmission line. After all of that, then we build transmission lines. And but I think we're missing the point if we just jump into the solution is only to build transmission lines. Period.
I was trying to say the same thing,
Clint. So if I understand what Kathleen suggested, and so again, these are my words. These are not words that are going to show up in the paper, in the document per se, is that that the reorientation that we think is important here and to carry forward is the recognition of minimizing the need for transmission build out. And that has implications for siting if we think about that. And so I heard Kathleen suggest that. I heard Katie say that fits more within the scope and the purview of what we're doing. Clint, if this came through with that reorientation, with the lead sentence being something like, you know, the principle is minimizing the need for build out because of the impacts on local communities, and then it has some implication for siting, how would that fit for you?
I think that works. I mean, I think that meets what we've been talking about all along is minimizing impacts to cultural, minimizing impacts to impacted communities, minimizing unnecessary costs. And so it's I'm fine with that should be of course that's what we always try to do. But we should probably mention that's been thought of. It's not just a given.
Okay, Kathleen, what do you think?
I think that would be good. I think that would help. And I do think it is what we talk about. I mean, we could go on for pages about all the considerations that go into that, right? Minimizing the need but I do think that it still doesn't take away from the fact that transmission is needed. but it does lay out for the public and for the people receiving this, that that's part of the consideration. And even though it is part of the consideration, because of the requirements on our utilities and our IOUs and et cetera through the process, it almost makes it more important to actually say that, because we do use that as a principle.
Okay, great. All right, so that's what folks can expect in the next version. Again, this is going to be another example where it would be useful to have 20 meetings, but we're not going to do that. And so, we're going to put language forward, and then obviously folks have the opportunity to offer their perspectives. And so, Clint, this might be a place where, if you feel very strongly, you might consider doing that, and vice versa, Lorna and Katie. Any final thoughts on this one? Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this one here is an expansion for Principle E7. The language that shows up in the proposed was language that Glenn suggested yesterday. He put it into the chat. We had some conversation over what that would look like. What is in the proposed column is the edited version that hopefully has the original language that Glenn suggested, and then the iterations that we went through yesterday. So we're proposing that that language on the right-hand column replace the language that's currently in the left-hand column. Any thoughts on this one? Yeah, Glenn, jump in.
I know I'm the one that suggested it, but just to kind of maybe slip in ahead of Clint here, I would be okay with changing renewable to clean. I recognize there's some possibility that some small modular reactors might be located in Eastern Washington or Idaho or Utah. And, the transmission planning ought to reflect that possibility.
Thank you, Glenn. Okay, other thoughts on this one? Okay, sweet. So I just want to do a time check. We're an hour in. I am so thrilled with this conversation, the exact conversation, the exact level of engagement that we're hoping to have. So I want to thank you all and encourage you to keep the energy up. After we get through these slides, we'll see where we're at with time. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this one here was the one that Susan and I struggled with the most. And we had also struggled in deciding in what order to talk about the principles here on this one. So this one has to do with the RTO, and the way that we talked about it yesterday is that that there may be an opportunity to be a little bit directive about some work that the WEC is doing, and identifying those things that could be part of that exploration of the creation of the RTO. And so what we did is we carried most of the original language, and then we added a sentence that talked about what that exploration of a creation of an RTO would look like. And what we had captured from the conversation yesterday was that that the kind of exploration would be focusing on regionally specific costs and benefit, regionally specific challenges and opportunities, and the intersection points with Washington and Oregon clean energy policy and goals. Those would be the types of things that you have to consider when thinking about what would an RTO look like here in Washington, the Pacific Northwest area here. So what do folks think about this? Did we capture this accurately? Help us.
I'll kick it off, Rob, because I seem to be doing that this morning. I guess I would prefer that if that's what we think that we should include, then I understand that WEC could be the party, but I don't think I'm comfortable by saying exploration could be coordinated by a third party neutral. I think if we want to say something, we should say exploration should focus on.
Okay, great.
And it should say should and not could, because if that's our view, then whoever takes it up needs to do that.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, Ravi, please. So Ravi, I see that you have called in on the phone, so I'm gonna send something to your phone, and it's gonna ask you to hit, I believe, star. Up there, you got it.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I was double muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So good morning. Sorry, I was a little late. I had a conflict, and Anders wanted something added in this slide, and where we talk about continue to explore creation of a regional transmission organization. His belief was that and/or participation in expanded day-ahead markets that also support efficient transmission management and economic dispatch of generation. I could put that in the chat box because I said quite a few words. But
no, Robbie, you don't have to put that in the chat box. So let's be explicit. So he suggested that yesterday, and I didn't carry it forward because I heard from the group yesterday, and I invite whoever it was, I don't remember who it was yesterday, that felt as if that was such a near-term thing that that it wasn't that what we were actually looking for here was I actually don't know enough about those things, but can someone who was on the call yesterday re-articulate what the point was on why to not carry that forward? Ravi, because he did bring that up, and I chose not to put it in because I thought that's what I heard yesterday.
Okay, can I get a quick rundown of someone who probably has some comments on it?
That would be really helpful. Yeah, Ravi, I need that too.
Was that something that we said that we may specify in our FSEC recommendations versus putting it in the principles?
I might have to go back to the live stream.
I know there was if I may, I know there was a discussion of the market specific pieces versus transmission. And that these were I think my recollection is that those were market focused, and I'm not sure everybody could see the connection to transmission. So maybe Ravi, if you can help us with that, and if somebody else has more information, please jump in.
Whether it's EDAN or whether it's EIN or any type of market, it has an impact on the utilization of the transmission and how to fully efficiently and optimize your transmission and build accordingly. So all these different market structures that we're looking at, they all make a difference in how your grid is going to get utilized, whether it's under energy imbalance market, it may be within, some smaller, shorter increments, a day ahead, maybe, a different sort of a market structure, but they all together result in some form of utilization of the transmission grid. And that utilization then sends a message or a signal to the transmission providers, whether they have a congestion issue that needs to be fixed or whether they can manage the system. If the congestion is severe and it is a hurdle, then the system has to be expanded. So I think any form of market behavior or market patterns whether it be part of a full-blown RTO, or whether it's a more of an incremental based market structure like EIM, EDAM, I think still needs to be considered in how we evaluate our transmission system. And anytime you're evaluating a transmission system, you are looking for efficient transmission management.
Great, Robbie,
So
thank you.
I just want to make sure that markets use transmission more efficiently. And it does provide, it is an indicator. So I was just, Anders was talking to me yesterday and he couldn't be here today to defend his point. So I thought maybe I'll hop on.
Thank you. And it looks like we got several comments in the chat along those same lines, and a suggestion from Stu, because to add and expanded participation in regional markets. Sorry.
That might get.
I was apologizing to Rob for jumping in on his role.
No, Kathleen, thank you. I appreciate that. I've got Rob and then Glenn. Rob.
Thanks, Rob. I wanted to focus on the wording, efficient dispatch of least cost resources given transmission constraints. And the least cost resources imperfectly embed the cost of fish and wildlife, even fish and wildlife constraints that are known through biological opinions and Corps of Engineers requirements. And we saw that in the modeling done by the Northwest Power Planning Council staff on the 8th Energy Plan. So I would say something like given transmission and other constraints, and I can do a deep dive into how fish and wildlife constraints might affect dispatch. But the marketing floor at Bonneville has a pretty good understanding, and they've gotten in trouble with the federal court judge with respect to trying to shore up voltage stability at the cost of fish. That was about a decade ago. I think we've got all of that worked out, but it's complicated. And so we want to make sure that all of the constraints on the system are kind of in the mix, not just transmission constraints. Thanks. And then the other is just kind of an observation, and building off of what the last commentator was saying. A lot of this stuff is happening piecemeal. What is the value added of doing it in a more aggregated setting? Does it bring the public power community into the conversation? Or are they, is it best that they continue to be sort of represented by Bonneville? There's a lot. The region has been looking at RTOs in my experience, for about 30 years. So if you really want to be successful, recognize what you got and figure out how you can find value added pieces to put together. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. So I'm going to come to Glenn, and then I'm going to review the bidding on this one. Glenn?
Okay, thanks. I think that markets generally, and well, let me say it this way, that the value proposition for exploring an RTO includes two basic things. One is the more efficient use of the resources we already have through, a market mechanism that the RTO would provide. The other one is that it could do a better job of planning and executing the investment in the transmission system over time. And there are, steps short of an RTO, like expanding the existing California market into a day-ahead design that could help with that first part about efficient use of existing resources. It at best would have an indirect effect on the planning and investment part. I just don't see it as anywhere near as effective at promoting better planning and investment compared to what an RTO could provide us.
I see. Okay, so I think the language that is up there is our attempt to thread the needle. So let me start from the top, working through it. So in the first bolded area, the addition of and expanded participation in regional markets is an attempt to acknowledge the point that Glenn and Ravi are making, that expanded participation in regional networks is an incremental step, but may not be the complete benefits of an RTO. So that's why we're including that. The text in teal or blue or whatever, and other was the recognition to acknowledge the point that Rob made. And then Kathleen, going all the way back to the beginning, Kathleen suggested a little more clarity, a little less directed, and assuming that WEC is going to do it, and just clarity that this is the type of work that this group has articulated as important regardless of who does it. So I think those are the changes that are in there. Looking at the screen and the text that's up on the screen, how's that fitting for folks in terms of final language for this one? Okay. I promise you, we're almost there, everybody. Okay, let's flip to the next slide, Susan. Okay, so the next slide here, this one, I think we're very close on. I expected this one to go pretty fast. Justin yesterday suggested the addition of the language that is in yellow. Several folks on the call asked Justin to provide the link so they could take a look at the link to make sure that the content in the link felt comfortable for folks. And so this is a circle back, seeing if folks had any final thoughts here on the addition of that yellow language, or that language highlighted in yellow.
Okay, I'm going to kick it off again.
Perfect.
I'm debating that ensure consistency term. And because it is a study that has recommendations. So it's not statutory. So I want to say something.
Consider.
Well, just acknowledging that, the work that's been done. I don't know, I want something stronger than that, but ensure consistency to me is more of a legalistic, like ensure consistency with rules and regulations. So that's what my challenge is there.
Thank you, Kathleen. Glenn?
Yeah, I feel like this is an overly broad endorsement of report prepared for a legislative committee. And I've gotten some narrowing of it from Justin. He can speak to this too, but apparently would be the recommended implementation strategies on pages 20 and 21 of the report. And one of those is for DOT to standardize specifications for common infrastructure. And it seems like that's DOT's job to do. And I feel uncomfortable having the electric transmission corridors work group, telling DOT to adopt common specifications. The other one that I think may be more relevant, what WashDOT is thinking of on this one, is to minimize costs and unnecessary digging by ensuring that stakeholders such as utility companies, WashDOT, and broadband providers work together to plan and execute project phases. Yeah, and then a second element of that has to do with working practices with local governments and tribal nations. If that's the, kind of the core that's being called for here, then I wonder if we could say that directly rather than trying to get at it through a report that's, mostly about fiber optics and things like that.
Got it. Justin, I think, yes, you're on the call. Justin, how would you feel about that modification that Glenn suggested, that we be very specific about where the Venn diagram intersects that report?
Sure, I understand that point with the specifications. I'm willing to hear alternative language to ensure consistency here. The main overarching point is that we have this report that sets out these general, pretty high level policies and strategies for the most part that build around this dig once or build once policy, whatever you want to call it, that with the intent of reducing the scale and the number of repeated excavations and permits needed to do this work. And I was just seeing the intersection between broadband, which is one of the focuses of the report, and this transmission group's mission, and just trying to be sure that the general recommendations are at least considered in this product that we're putting out here. So I'm more than happy to hear a different wording of this for this E10 here.
And Justin, would you agree with what Glenn shared there, that the key intersection point is those recommendations around the dig once?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is what I'd like to propose in the language that folks are going to see, that that we be more specific about where that intersection point is, and then Kathleen, we will work to have language that is not, that's not implying it's that is appropriate for the kind of document it is, that this is not an RCW, so we don't have to ensure consistency with it. It is a set of concepts that we want to make sure we align with, or something like that. Okay, great. Okay, all right, let's go to the next one. This is the last one. And so this is brand new language, and just a explicit recognition that there is some overlap between the two of them. And so, but we decided that the kernel of each of them were very different. So let me describe the kernels here of each of these two principles. So these two principles were gaps that we identified that we thought would be important to include in the report based on our set of conversations yesterday as part of reactions and discussion around Arnie's and Sarah's presentation. The first one is a recognition that that the state of Washington needs to play a role or have a role more explicitly defined in coordinating the participation in transmission development activities and long-term transmission planning. The second one, while Washington State might play a part in it, is an explicit recognition that there is an opportunity in front of folks to take advantage of federal funding to both encourage the transmission development, and then, as Katie said yesterday, to help build the electricity grid of the future. So we chose to separate those two concepts, and what we're proposing are the following two new principles to section E. So why don't we take the first one first and the second one second? What reflections do folks have? Do we capture the concept of, the Washington State role in that first principle there? Yeah, Glenn.
I like the idea of calling for greater involvement by state government in the electric power transmission planning work. I think I'd rather it say that more directly instead of kind of explaining the why of it first and then getting to the what of it. But in general, I do like the idea of having this group call for more state government involvement in transmission planning and investments even.
Okay. Yeah, and Glenn, just to be honest, we struggled with trying to maintain the consistent language of verb first on this one with the principles. Yep, Don, please.
Hi, I keep putting myself in the role of a legislator who's reading this. And, by saying that the governor could establish a point person or team is going to be taken by offense, I guess, by some legislators. So if there's another way of wording how the state could establish this.
I think, sorry,
know.
Dawn, I jumped in on you. I've been doing that too much today. I agree with you.
But I know you, so that's fine.
How about designate? Designate a point person or team within Washington State government. And that's your verb.
Yeah, great. Love it. A point person. Yep. Perfect.
Or I don't know if we want to say a point person, but designate a lead within Washington State government. And that's pretty open then.
Yeah, that's better.
And lead with
it. Lead with that, and then after that, say this will ensure Washington's ability to, as Glenn said, this will ensure Washington's ability to meet. Yeah, perfect. Glenn and Don, does that work for you?
Yeah,
that's for me.
Less offended by that as an elected official.
Representative Don.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Any other thoughts here on that first one? And then I do want to move to the second one here. Okay, so the second one, what do folks think? This is just to be explicit about the funding opportunities in the next several years. Glenn, I see a thumbs up. Thank you. Other thoughts?
It's maybe Rob, I got my hand up.
I see ya.
Thanks. It's really kind of a question for Dawn. The tribal interests, particularly the Acma's interests, are, kind of in the crosshairs. Is there a word or something I mean, should work together with the state of Washington to participate, should we say, and other governments to participate in these programs, something like that. I just want to make sure that that there's room for the tribes. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I
We ca-
wouldn't say other governments. I would specifically then say, I mean,
And
they're
tribal.
working with local and tribal governments, so
Well, can we also add for transmission development and grid enhancement? Because as we heard from Sarah yesterday, I mean, there are several opportunities for tribes to apply for grants too.
Sorry.
Spilling
Right.
off the bottom of the slide.
I know, I'm working on it. How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Kathleen, I got a little caught up in mechanics.
I was saying in the first statement, leverage opportunities to access federal fundings, leverage opportunities to access federal funding through federal programs for transmission development and grid enhancement.
Mhm. How do folks feel about the additions there?
The three words through federal programs might just be redundant.
Yeah, now it is. Yeah, totally.
So take that out.
Yeah, unless we want to say, the more we say federal, the more likely you are to get funding. So okay, I'm going to call it. It feels like we're pretty close here. So this is what's going to happen. We're going to take a break. You all deserve it. You guys all earned it. That's wonderful. This was an awesome, like almost 100 minutes of intense like wordsmithing and concept. And so I recognize how taxing that can be to do that, especially over a Zoom. So Susan, if you could flip the slide up, I want to leave the slide up for the public comment, because that's where we're going to next. We're going to take 10 minutes, so we're running about 1 minute late on the public comment, but I want to give folks the full 10-minute break. For the folks that are on the live stream, we're going to be taking a break. We're going to be coming back at about 10:41 or 10:42 for public comment. If you are a member of the public and you're on the live stream and you are interested in providing public comment, the information for you to access the Zoom is up there on the screen. We ask that you access the Zoom. You're going to be put in a waiting room. When we convene the meeting again, you will be invited to come in from the waiting room. We're asking folks to limit their comments to 2 minutes, and you're going to be unable to mute your phone until we invite you to unmute. So please return to the TCWG members in 10 minutes, and to the members of the public who are interested in providing public testimony, please join the Zoom by 10:40 or 10:41, and you will be put in a waiting room, and then we will bring you in. So break until 10:42. Thanks, everyone. Okay, we're about a minute away, everybody. Actually, a minute and a half here. So we're gonna be right on time at 10:42. Okay, I will ask that folks find their way back to their Zoom screens, please. Hi, Justin, we're going to come to you in just 1 second here. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So we have now hit the point of the public comment. We have one guest, Justin Allegro. And so I don't see anyone else in the waiting room. So if there are folks that are on the live stream and you are interested in providing public testimony, public comment, now is the time. Justin, we ask that you frame your remarks and keep it to 2 minutes. And so Justin, please go ahead and you should be able to unmute yourself and jump right in.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Allegro. I am working with the Nature Conservancy in Washington. I am the Director of State Government Relations for the Nature Conservancy. Been tracking the work of this group. Want to thank you all for your efforts. One task from the legislature for the work group was to identify areas where transmission and distribution facilities may need to be enhanced or constructed. And with great sensitivities to the timeline y'all are facing, we'd really like to encourage you to support transmission planning that identifies and prioritizes high resource quality but lower conflict renewable energy generation areas. As the state is initiating least conflict electricity generation planning, and actually considering planned action pre-review under Growth Management Act for generation of electricity, this group has an important opportunity to sort of create some momentum for associated transmission grid modeling and planning that also accounts for priority generation areas in Washington. And we think this is really consistent with the objectives of the group and also consistent with these other state-led initiatives that are underway around energy infrastructure. I just wanted to note, I think some of you are aware, the Nature Conservancy just completed a project called Power of Place West, which uses the same modelers that did the Washington State Energy Strategy update to model clean energy pathways and land use for economy-wide decarbonization across 11 states in the West. We have, in July, we'll be downscaling that to Washington state snapshots that show state-specific data on clean energy portfolios by scenario, deployment rates, and most likely locations for those different technologies. So we'd love the opportunity to present that to the state team if possible, knowing your timeline is kind of running up for your report here, but this work is going to continue. And lastly, I'd just like to strongly support those new principles in Section E, stemming from Sarah's excellent presentation yesterday. I think that's a really important addition to this work. Thank you so much, and thank you for undertaking this important effort.
Great, Justin, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, Susan, Michaela, do we have anyone else pop into the waiting room?
No, no one as of now, Rob.
Okay, great. All right, so here's what this is how we're gonna spend the balance of our time. We've got about a little over an hour left. I want to make sure that that we button up any of the final changes to the report. Brendan suggested some languages to set to Principle F1. We're going to bring up a slide that we pulled together over the break to go over that. And excuse me, Lorna, you had chatted me at the beginning, and I made a note to myself to check back in with you, but I didn't do that. That you had one other thought that you wanted to share about something in E, and I did not make space for you to do that before the break. So I will do that after Brendan. Once we get through all of the final changes to the report, then we're going to pivot and have that future-looking conversation, and we're going to lump that with the look back. So we had thought we might have time to do those things separately, but we wanted to prioritize finishing the report. So after we spend as much time as we need on finishing the report, then I'm going to provide some space for you all to reflect on the process and reflect on going forward. So what we have up there on the screen now is very similar structure to what we had before. On the left is the original F1 proposed language, and Brendan provided in the chat some slight modifications. Brendan, I'm going to turn to you to invite you to describe what the changes are, why you think we need them, and then I'm going to invite folks to jump into the conversation.
Certainly, thanks, Rob. There's some efficiencies and flexibility built into SEPA to use or combine with NEPA review, but without the right planning around timing, you can't leverage those efficiencies. So if SEPA goes first, NEPA doesn't have the corresponding ability to use the SEPA review. So if state agencies get an application too early and we are compelled to start SEPA because of a clock issue, we can't mesh that with NEPA. Sometimes it just doesn't fit. The federal and state agency views around a project are far apart. But when possible, some advanced work should be done to try to line things up and reduce the number of documents. So just added that in besides the analytical methodology, which seems a little more technical to me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Brendan. Any reflections on that? Folks are comfortable with that change? Yeah, Lorna.
Sorry, I'm good with that change. I was popped back on and I knew I made another comment, so I was going to follow up when you're ready.
Okay, great. So we will entertain comments here on F1. Okay, sweet.
All right, this is Allison. Did you, actually by law, you can align NEPA and the National Historic Preservation Act. Did you want to throw in NHPA or other environmental laws? Because you're just talking NEPA and SEPA, but actually you can align some of the other environmental laws with NEPA. But maybe I'm just muddling the whole thing.
I don't know what you folks think. I don't claim to understand the processes enough to know.
Nobody understands the processes of the federal government unless you're mired in them every day. But my point is that you actually can take some of the other federal laws like the National Historic Preservation Act and combine them with a NEPA review. So not everything is totally separate. So I might be muddying the waters by making that point, but I just thought I'd let you know.
Looks like there's a couple other hands here. I think it's a good point, and maybe we can say something more broad that includes NEPA and SEPA and other federal, but go ahead,
Justin, yeah.
Yeah, that Allison's correct. I think that there's an assumption made here that we're generally talking about the NEPA umbrella, which covers, that's a process that covers the other environmental and related state and federal laws. So I don't think we need to call out there. I mean, because we could also call out Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. There's a whole bunch, but I think as an umbrella statement, this still captures that, Allison, if you agree.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to make that point and apparently confuse Rob at the same time.
Which isn't that difficult. Okay, perfect. Lorna, you're up.
Hey, sorry about that. So I just forgot yesterday, one more thing on page 6 on E1, Principles for Transmission System Planning. I just want to point out, having come off of stuff, so it says ensure that all practicable alternatives to building additional transmission infrastructure have been or will be considered. And so just the all and the have been or will be, I just see as a little problematic, and this is why. These investments, I mean, we're retroactively judged, retroactive rate making in the state, right? These investments are such big investments. You need to look at everything, evaluate everything, and then you have to kick off the project at some point. And so the word all and the have been or will be, I just worry that we're never going to get projects off the ground because there's never an end to what you're analyzing.
So is it, yeah, I see you squinting, so it's probably too small, Lorna.
No, it's okay.
Is it, thank you.
So ensure that all, just taking out the all and changing the have been or will be to just saying are considered. And that's consistent with what, what the laws require. There's not like an ongoing, I mean, there's a point at which everything's reviewed and approved and you have all your permits and you move forward. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I don't know how Susan does it. There it is.
So it's really just a timing issue.
Thank you. What do folks think about that? Yeah, Glenn?
I like it. I think, as I recall, the will be part came along because we were wanting to acknowledge that, it's like it shouldn't occur in, a strict order, and that we shouldn't wait for transmission until all these other things had to been considered. So just moving it all into the present tense, I think is an improvement.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, fabulous. Any final thoughts on this? Okay, great. Congratulations. That was awesome. So just to reiterate the timeline, June 24, you're going to get clean version of this. You have till July 7th. And the question we're going to be asking you is, do you agree with the comments? Do you agree that the report reflects the deliberations of the group? Do you agree that it reflects the deliberations of the group and you're interested in adding comments and that we will then take unedited and place into the table for the final? Or do you not agree, and why you don't agree? And again, we'll take the unedited comments and put them into the table. We'll package that up July, what did I say before, July 17th, I believe. And that will go out to you and to Kathleen. And at that point, Kathleen is on the clock to, as time permits, draft a transmittal letter and get it to the Washington State Legislature by November. So that's what's going to happen next. Kathleen, any final thoughts here on the report before they then pivot to reflections and next steps going forward?
Just again, I appreciate everybody's contribution. We have a lot of different points of view, life stories, perspectives. This is a big undertaking to achieve our goals, our energy goals in the future. So thank you so much for your participation today and throughout, and look forward to our times that we get to work together to implement this.
Yep. So why don't we pivot to that then? And so we had some time set aside here for you all to reflect on this process and then reflect on the point there that Kathleen ended. Like what, how and what could you all do going forward to leverage the work and the energy and the momentum that you all created going forward? And so I'm hopeful that we hear from most of you, over the course of the next hour, just sharing your thoughts and your reflections on the process with your colleagues. And so I'm not going to call anyone out, but I am inviting and hopeful that folks are willing to share. And so do I have any Gold Star TCWG members who are willing to start the conversation? Glenn, thank you.
I am happy to do that. And, I really appreciate the fact that the legislature created this group at the time it enacted CETA, because I think in retrospect, that gave us a very important opportunity to talk about these issues. When they passed that law in 2019, we recognized that transmission was going to be important, but I don't think we really appreciated how important it would be. That came out later through the state energy strategy work, and then even more so with lots of other work that's happened across the country at the federal level, et cetera. And I just feel like Washington was fortunate to have this group convened and charged with doing this work. And I really appreciate everybody's constructive engagement on this. It's been, for me, very informative to see the different levels of concern and the different aspects that go into all this. There are so many good reasons why it's hard to build transmission, and there are so many good reasons why it's important that we succeed at this. So I just feel thankful for the work of this group and to the legislature for setting it up in the first place. And now, Rob, you're on mute.
Not only am I on mute, my mouse stopped working. So it's a double whammy. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you starting us off. Yeah, so other TCWG members, please jump in. Yeah, Clint, please.
Just like Glenn said, I appreciate the opportunity to participate, and I'm sorry if passion comes out in this. It's a good process, and it does take us all. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clint.
And my apologies for over talking Kathleen when she was trying to interject earlier. I didn't realize who that was. I apologize.
No need to apologize for that, Clinton. No one should have to apologize for feeling strongly and caring either.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Kathleen. Other thoughts?
Sure, I can jump in.
Yeah, Brendan, please.
Yeah, want to thank Kathleen and Joe and Stu and all the Ross strategic team to kind of convene this thing and create a good space for people to bring their ideas forward and feel comfortable providing feedback. I thought it was a well-run process. So congratulations for doing a good process.
Thank you, Brendan. Allison, I saw you come up.
Yeah, I'll just add my thanks too, and just remind people that whether we're doing transmission or Kathleen and I are on the low carbon energy siting group, these are really hard conversations because we're trying to balance natural and cultural resource protection with the need for energy, and sometimes there's no balancing. One has to give for the other, and it's just a difficult place to be. You know, I always say there's a lot of people out there with a lot of needs, particularly energy needs. So thanks to everybody for all the times when I brought up tribal consultation and cultural resources, and thanks for Ross Strategic for listening as well. And just thank everybody for working through what is just a really, really difficult conversation. And of course, my concern is always going from planning and ideas to implementation. So hopefully some of these will actually get implemented. Hopefully, Kathleen, there'll be a presentation at the federal level too, somehow, or somewhere, maybe to our Washington State delegation. I don't know where this goes in terms of the federal side.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, Ben, jump in.
I'll pile on to the appreciation and thanks, and especially Rob for you and the Ross Strategic team. I thought you guys really did a great job with this and made the whole process seamless, and knowing where we were going, where we were headed, and we got there. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think we should end on that comment. No, I'm just kidding. No, I really am interested in hearing from as many folks as possible. This is right the last convening of the group, and so any thoughts that you want to share with your colleagues would be awesome. Yeah, Don, please.
Well, it's always hard, and I appreciate the legislature adding tribes to these conversations. I work for 3 different tribes, and you know, the impact on their resources for not only the new facilities that are going in, alternative energy facilities, but also you know, where these grids are all going to be located are really on their lands, historically, prehistorically. And so I think it's been this process, as well as all the other processes that are going on with state agencies, has been very difficult for them. So I hope that when we see the draft, that we're going to be able to incorporate, you know, some of their inputs and thoughts that have been a little bit hard to do during the meetings, because I, for one, am a slow reader. And so it's been pretty fast paced. My council, I just wanted to recognize also that today is an anniversary of the signing of the 1855 Treaty of Walla Walla with the Yakima Nation. And so they're celebrating that day today, June 9th. And that's why my council is not on the call. So whether or not that's a celebration or not, you know, that's kind of personal opinion for me, but that is a recognition and celebration for them. But I want to thank Rob and did she leave?
Susan. No, she's
Susan. Here she is. I don't see her here right now, but I want to thank Susan too for all your you know, just for keeping us on track, keeping us aware of what the goals are for this group, what we were tasked to do. And, you know, I look forward to seeing a product that a slow reader like me can kind of go through and figure out, you know, if it captured what my council wanted to contribute.
Please extend our thanks to the councilman for his representation, and he was here very much throughout our discussion. So I'm sorry the last day was one that he couldn't make, but really appreciate participation.
I will make sure he knows. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, Rob, jump in.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks to your team at Ross Strategic, Rob and Kathleen and Glenn and others. I really appreciate the recognition of the regional context of these issues. The commission that I work for was created by Yakima, Warm Springs, Umatilla, and this person. And as many of you know, Umatilla is just a stone's throw from the Tri-Cities. All of the tribes have interests in Washington, and are affected by what goes on in the region and outside the region with California and BC Hydro. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
Hey, Rob, this is Katie Ware, Renewable Northwest. Again, I'll echo the thank yous to Ross Strategic and the folks at FSEC, all of the vocal stakeholders who've been involved. This has been so productive, and I am so happy with where we ended, which is in a place of actually making some proactive recommendations. And I think that we hit a lot of really important points around transmission and where we need to go to build an efficient system, modernize our system, and what we need to think about in order to expand what we do have, and how to think about things in a more regional fashion. We kind of covered everything, and so for us at Renewable Northwest, of course, we want to see us hit our clean energy mandates in a timely fashion and reach those greenhouse gas emission reductions that we hope for. And what we have heard for a long time, that there's a fear of utilities using all of the off ramps because potentially transmission won't be there to help bring those resources to load. And I think that these actionable steps that we've recommended out of the work group will really help us to tackle that issue. And again, thank you so much for everyone who put their head down and thought really hard about what we could actually do and not just think about further, what we could actually do. So thanks again.
Thank you, Katie. Kathleen, we can wallow in the silent encore for maybe another minute. And then if we don't hear anything else, then I'm going to come to you for final thoughts.
I'll just jump in and express my appreciation for being part of this group and for working with all of you folks. And I think we did a lot of great work here, and I think it really sets the stage for a lot more great work in the future. I was just looking at a lot of our principles here and realizing that it seems like a lot of them apply to linear projects in other linear projects and in other states. So in terms of the value of our work, I think it could potentially be used by others as well. But I just think we've done some good work here, and I really appreciate everyone's work and interest and time. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope you did as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Hi, this is Kim from the Navy. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Kim, we can hear you loud and clear.
All right. I'm on the phone call here. So I just wanted to say on behalf of the military, I appreciate the opportunity to participate and support. It was great seeing the implementation or support for early notification and coordination to the DoD in regards to our operation areas. I think as much as we want to provide transparency and coordination, this is really a huge step in that direction. So just want to thank FSEC and the team for really helping support and, again, allowing us to have a voice at the table.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, last call. Kathleen, over to you.
Thank you. And I want to join everyone in thanking our team who did the heavy lifting of preparing the agendas, talking to speakers, inviting speakers to participate, and so many of you who did make presentations throughout the course of this effort, because your presentations have truly informed the outcome and made the backbone of our learning and our recommendations and principles that'll be going forward to the legislature and the governor. And I do also want to thank, of course, our facilitators who pulled all of this together and all the work they did in between. Many members who have been active were also active because of calls in between and meetings in between where Rob or Susan would ask for more information and clarify information. And a lot of that went on behind the scenes. And there's a lot of work that everyone has done, but particularly Ross Strategic and Joe and Stu on our team in pulling all that together between our meetings in order to make this a success. To me, success is really showing a path forward, as well as representing the diverse points of view that we had on this team and in this work group. So if we've done that, it's a success, and I believe we have done it, and it's I think really guiding document to the state moving forward. I know there will be lots of different steps in order to achieve the goals through transmission, and we may be playing different roles, making decisions as we move through this process. But I do also hope that this process has provided us with an introduction to each other, both personally and also in terms of the values that we all share and have come together in order to achieve this future for Washington State. So thank you all.
Great. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Great job.
Bye, folks.